It was the week before Christmas, and Robert Hall sat alone in his enormous mansion, staring at the long, empty dining table that stretched across the room like a reminder of everything missing from his life. The house was beautifully decorated with garlands, twinkling lights, and a towering Christmas tree, yet the festive atmosphere only made the silence feel louder. His children were grown and scattered across the globe, caught up in their own lives. Friends had their own celebrations, leaving Robert to face the holidays with nothing but his memories and Max, his aging golden retriever. For the first time in decades, he felt the sting of loneliness sharpened by wealth, privilege, and the absence of family. Determined to avoid spending Christmas completely alone, he made a call to his assistant. "Find me a private chef for Christmas dinner," he said, a slight edge of desperation in his voice. "Someone who can cook something special. I don't want the usual catering." The next morning, Lin Mei arrived at the Hall estate. She was a young Chinese widow, small in stature but carrying herself with quiet dignity. Her eyes held a gentle warmth, tinged with the sadness of someone who had already faced the harsh realities of life. Robert learned that she had recently moved to the city after the death of her husband, seeking work to support herself and honor her late husband's family. Something about her presence, humble yet resilient, made him pause, though he quickly dismissed the thought as sentimentality. Robert had always been accustomed to chefs who followed recipes with mechanical precision, creating dishes that were impressive to the eye but devoid of soul. He greeted Lin Mei with polite skepticism. "I hope you can handle a traditional Christmas dinner," he said. Lin Mei bowed her head slightly and replied softly, "I may not have celebrated Christmas before, sir, but I cook with care." "That is enough, isn't it?" Her words, simple as they were, made an unexpected impact on him, though he couldn't yet understand why. As she began preparing the meal, Robert observed her quietly. She worked with meticulous attention to detail, chopping vegetables with precision, seasoning with a light hand, and arranging ingredients with the patience of someone who treated food not as a task, but as an offering. Each movement was deliberate, almost meditative, and Robert found himself strangely captivated. Dinner began with a roasted chestnut and mushroom soup, followed by a golden brown turkey stuffed with ginger, garlic, and fresh herbs. Each course carried subtle, unfamiliar flavors that blended east and west in ways Robert couldn't fully identify, yet each bite evoked a deep sense of comfort and warmth. By the time Lin Mei brought out dessert, a warm sesame and honey pudding, Robert realized he had been experiencing something he hadn't felt in years, a profound sense of contentment and connection. That night, Robert understood that he hadn't merely hired a cook. He had invited someone into his life who reminded him of simple joys, of care, kindness, and the invisible threads that bind people together. As he leaned back in his chair, savoring the final moments of the evening, he felt a quiet shift within himself. Christmas had finally come alive, not through decorations or gifts, but through a woman who had poured her heart into a meal, and in doing so, had begun to change his life forever. The morning after Christmas, Robert woke with an unfamiliar lightness in his chest. The house no longer felt like a cavern of loneliness. The dinner prepared by Lin Mei lingered in his mind, the way the flavors had unfolded, how each bite seemed to tell a story he couldn't quite put into words. Even Max, his usually aloof dog, seemed to sense the difference in the air, wagging his tail more energetically than usual. Robert realized that he wanted to see Lin Mei again, not just as a chef, but as a person whose presence had brought warmth into a home that had long been cold. He called her into the study that afternoon under the pretense of discussing leftover preparations. When Lin Mei entered, she was carrying a small basket of herbs and a few fresh vegetables she had picked from the local market, her movements still graceful and measured. Robert studied her quietly for a moment, noticing the faint sadness in her eyes that lingered behind her calm composure. "You didn't just cook last night," he said softly, "you changed the atmosphere of this house. I didn't realize it could feel this alive." Lin Mei smiled politely, but her eyes reflected a mixture of gratitude and humility. "I only cook with care, sir. The rest is not mine to claim." Despite his usual reserve, Robert felt compelled to learn more about her. He asked about her life in her hometown, the struggles she had endured after losing her husband, and the journey that had brought her to the city. Lin Mei spoke quietly, often pausing as if choosing her words with great care, painting images of a life filled with both hardship and moments of quiet beauty. Robert listened, fascinated, and for the first time in years, he didn't feel the need to dominate the conversation or impress anyone. He simply listened. In the following days, Robert found himself noticing her in ways he had never noticed anyone before. He watched how she arranged the table with understated elegance, how she moved through the kitchen with calm precision, and how the simple act of preparing food seemed to ripple through the house, leaving a subtle but profound sense of peace. One afternoon, he even offered to help her chop vegetables, a clumsy effort that made Lin May laugh softly, the sound gentle and soothing. He realized he had not laughed like that in years. By the end of the week, a routine developed. Lin May cooked, Robert observed, and together they shared small conversations and quiet moments that felt heavier with meaning than any business meeting or social gathering he had ever attended. He began to understand that the life-changing effect of her cooking wasn't just in the flavors or presentation, it was in the care, thoughtfulness, and humanity she infused into everything she touched. The dinner had been only the beginning. Her presence was transforming his understanding of connection, empathy, and the kind of joy that comes from giving and receiving with an open heart. One evening, as they cleared the dishes from a simple lunch of stir-fried vegetables and rice, Robert caught himself smiling at the thought that for the first time in a long time, the idea of sharing his life with someone again didn't feel impossible. Lin May, quietly humming a tune he didn't recognize, didn't notice the subtle shift in his gaze, but it didn't matter. Something had changed in Robert, deep and irrevocable. Christmas had passed, but its gift lingered, not in the food she cooked, but in the way she reminded him that life, when shared, could be beautiful again. Winter deepened, and with it, Robert found himself looking forward to the small daily rituals he had developed with Lin May. It was no longer just about the meals she prepared, though they remained extraordinary. It was about her presence, the way she transformed the quiet halls of his mansion into a home that felt alive. He noticed it in small ways, the soft scent of ginger and garlic lingering in the air, the warmth that radiated from the kitchen long after the cooking was done, and the way Max would follow Lin May around, sensing her gentle energy. Robert, a man who had long defined his life by work, power, and routine, felt the first cracks in his armor of detachment. One snowy afternoon, Robert watched Lin May kneading dough for dumplings, her hands moving rhythmically as if she were performing a kind of meditation. He had never thought of cooking as anything more than a task, but seeing her work awakened a strange fascination within him. He stepped closer, offering to help, and she handed him a rolling pin with a quiet smile. He fumbled with it, rolling the dough unevenly, and Lin May laughed softly, not at his clumsiness, but with a warmth that made him feel unexpectedly comfortable in his own awkwardness. "Patience," she said gently, "is the secret ingredient in everything." The words struck him in a way that had nothing to do with cooking. Over the next few weeks, Lin May began introducing Robert to elements of her culture. They shared green tea in the study while she told him stories of her childhood festivals, the way her village celebrated harvests, and the traditions her husband had loved. Robert listened with genuine curiosity, realizing he had spent years avoiding connection because he feared vulnerability. Lin May's quiet strength and openness created a safe space for him to let down his walls. He began to understand that life wasn't meant to be endured in isolation, it was meant to be experienced with others, in shared moments of joy and care. One evening, she prepared a simple meal of braised pork with steamed buns, each piece perfectly balanced with sweet and savory flavors. Robert watched her plate the food with precision, and when he tasted it, he felt something shift inside him. It was more than the flavor, it was the love and intention behind it, a reminder that even small acts could carry profound meaning. He realized that Lin May had not only fed his body, but also nourished parts of him he had long neglected, his heart, his empathy, and his capacity for connection. By the end of the month, Robert's home had changed as much as he had. The mansion no longer felt cold and echoing, it had warmth, laughter, and life. He found himself volunteering to help with cooking, walking the dog with Max alongside Lin May, and even inviting old friends over in ways he hadn't in years. It was subtle at first, but everything in his life was beginning to reflect the quiet transformation she had sparked. One night, as he watched Lin May clean up after dinner, Robert realized he no longer thought of her as just a cook. She had become the pulse of his home, the gentle presence that reminded him that life could be more than wealth and routine. She had changed him, not through grand gestures, but through patience, care, and the quiet magic of a meal shared with heart. And deep down, he knew that this was only the beginning of the change that would shape the rest of his life. As the days grew shorter and the winter wind blew colder, Robert realized he was no longer counting the hours until Christmas or the dinners prepared by Lin May. He was counting the moments he got to spend with her. What had started as curiosity had transformed into something deeper, though he struggled to name it. He found himself lingering in the kitchen, watching her move with quiet grace, listening to the soft rhythm of her voice as she explained the subtleties of her cooking, and noticing how her eyes seemed to hold a history of both sorrow and resilience. Each day, her presence wove itself more intricately into the fabric of his life, and he felt a profound gratitude he had never experienced before. One evening, as Lin May prepared a fragrant broth with fresh vegetables and aromatic spices, Robert felt compelled to share something he had never admitted to anyone: his fear of being alone. He had always hidden behind wealth, achievements, and control, convincing himself that these things could replace companionship. But watching Lin May carefully taste the broth and hum softly, he found himself speaking from a place he hadn't touched in decades. "I used to think I could do everything on my own," he admitted. "I never realized how much I was missing by shutting everyone out." Lin May paused and looked at him with understanding, her expression gentle but unwavering. "Life is not meant to be carried alone," she said softly. "Even in sadness, we are stronger when we share it." Her words, simple yet profound, stirred something in Robert he hadn't expected: a willingness to be vulnerable. That night, as they sat together over a modest meal of braised fish and jasmine rice, he noticed how different it felt from the grand, impersonal dinners he had once hosted. The food was extraordinary, yes, but it was the connection, the quiet laughter, the shared stories, the understanding in her eyes, that made the experience transformative. He realized that Lin May had not just taught him about flavor, technique, or culture, she had taught him about humanity, patience, and the quiet power of care. Over the following days, Robert began to let her influence touch other parts of his life. He invited old friends he had neglected for years, engaged in conversations he would have normally avoided, and even took the time to reconnect with his children through long phone calls. All the while, Lin May continued to cook, seemingly unaware of the profound effect her presence had on him. Each meal was a lesson in mindfulness, gratitude, and the subtle ways kindness can change the atmosphere of a home, and the heart of a man. By mid-January, Robert's transformation was undeniable, though he was only beginning to understand its full scope. The mansion, once a place of silence and emptiness, was now filled with warmth, laughter, and light. Max, too, seemed more spirited, as if sensing the shift in his master's mood. Robert knew he owed this change not to money, influence, or status, but to the quiet widow who had walked into his home with nothing but a basket of ingredients, a humble heart, and an extraordinary ability to connect through the simplest of acts: cooking. As he watched Lin May carefully clean the dishes after another meal, Robert felt a surge of clarity. The life he had thought complete without companionship was incomplete, and she had shown him the truth. His loneliness, his fear, and his rigidity had begun to dissolve, not because he sought to change, but because she had, without knowing it, led him back to life itself. And he understood, in that quiet, reflective moment, that he could never go back to the way things had been. By the time February arrived, Robert Hall's life had changed in ways he could hardly have imagined. What had begun as a simple Christmas dinner had blossomed into a profound transformation, one that touched every corner of his home and heart. Lin May continued to cook with the same care and dedication, but now Robert noticed that her meals were no longer just food, they were symbols of hope, renewal, and connection. Each bite carried warmth, each aroma carried memory, and each shared meal became an unspoken conversation of trust and companionship. One afternoon, Robert watched Lin May prepare a delicate fish stew, the steam curling around her like a soft halo. He realized he was no longer content to remain in the shadows, observing her from afar. He wanted to be part of her world, to share life with someone whose presence made everything brighter. Summoning courage he hadn't felt in decades, he approached her as she stirred the pot. "Lin May," he said, his voice uncharacteristically gentle, "you've changed my life in ways I never thought possible. Not just through your cooking, but through your heart. I don't want this to end. I don't want to go back to being alone." Lin May turned to him, her eyes wide with quiet surprise, and for a moment neither spoke. Then, slowly, she smiled. Life gives us moments like this, she said softly. We can choose to embrace them, or we can let them pass. I have never seen someone open so fully, so honestly. Your heart, it is ready. Robert felt something break inside him, a mixture of relief, gratitude, and hope. He understood that his life, which had once been defined by isolation and routine, could now be defined by connection, love, and shared joy. The following weeks were filled with subtle, meaningful shifts. Robert began joining Lin May in the kitchen, learning the intricacies of her cooking, and discovering not only flavors but stories behind each ingredient. Together, they experimented with new dishes, blending traditions and creating meals that symbolized the merging of their worlds. Laughter became a constant presence in the house, and the walls that had once echoed with emptiness now resonated with life. Max, ever the faithful companion, seemed to sense the change, following them from room to room with a wagging tail and a contented expression. One evening, as they shared a quiet dinner by the fire, Robert realized the true extent of the gift Lin May had given him. It was not wealth, status, or luxury, it was something far more enduring. The ability to feel fully alive, to connect deeply, and to embrace vulnerability without fear. He looked at her, eyes brimming with emotion, and said, "You've taught me what it means to live again. You've made me believe in happiness that doesn't come from money or success, but from heart, care, and shared moments. I don't know how to thank you enough." Lin May reached across the table, placing her hand lightly over his, a gesture that conveyed understanding and warmth. "You don't need to thank me," she said. "You just need to live, and let the life you have rediscovered unfold." In that moment, Robert realized that the lonely man who had once stared at an empty table had ceased to exist. The life he now had, full of warmth, laughter, and connection, was a gift he could never have imagined. Lin May's presence had not only changed his Christmas dinner, it had changed his life forever. And as they sat together, sharing the simple joy of a meal prepared with care, Robert knew with certainty that the true magic of that Christmas would live in his heart for the rest of his days.